welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this in our Untapped webinar. We're going to be talking today about Innovation Gym, which is our training, a new way that we've developed with Laura of enhancing your innovation skills. So anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Suanne Allers. I'm a partner, one of the founding partners at Untapped. And I'm delighted to have Laura Flessner here today, who's an innovation consultant and coach and CEO of MindTap, who's worked with us on Innovation Gym, and she's going to discuss with us about some of the thinking and recent developments in neuroscience and education principles that are behind Innovation Gym, and helps us to try and create this new way to kind of really flex and hone your innovation muscles. So if we stay on mute for the next little while we're chatting, we'll open up to Q&A at the end. So what we're going to really start with just a little bit around why did we do this? Why have we created Innovation Gym? And we'll explore some of the sort of challenges about traditional innovation training that companies and teams can face. And we'll give you three big things that we'd love for you to be able to take away from today's discussion. We'll spend most of the time discussing with Laura about her expertise in applying these principles of neuroscience, education principles, and agile innovation, and how that's really helped inform how we've designed the Innovation Gym. And then hopefully we'll have some QA at the end. So just jumping into this then, thinking about why have we created Innovation Gym? And really, I was discussing this with Laura the other day. I recall a couple of years ago when we could all actually meet face to face, we were together with a client at the end of a workshop on a project, and the client was very, very stressed. And I sort of asked, is everything okay? Where's the stress coming from? She said, I've got a training course in the next 2 days, and I'm working day and night to try and get ready for the training course. And so I said, oh gosh, is it something you really want to do on the training? She said, well, yes, actually it is something I want to do, but it's so long, and I've got to take time out of my day job. Half of it's just going to sit in a drawer, and honestly, I'll probably have forgotten half of it by Monday anyway. So yes, I really want to do it, and I want to stay fresh, but it's just not that easy. So we got thinking about how we could really maybe what could be different, and how could an innovation training be different. So it wasn't the first time we'd heard that from a client. It wasn't the last time we'd heard either. What we typically heard was that the challenges that teams face are, time pressure. Innovation is a huge topic. You can't do it all at once, and it's a very fast-moving topic. So it's difficult to make the time for it, and it's difficult to keep up. And they haven't got time to wait and digest everything, and they need to be able to get something they can act on really quickly. And obviously, especially in the current climate, remote and hybrid work sometimes can make getting effective training challenging. So, what we heard overall was, look, what I'd love to have in an ideal world is training that's really easy to fit into my schedule, that's really engaging when I do it, and that's really effective, that I can remember it and apply it straight away. And if you can give me those three things, that would really be great. So we kind of went back to the drawing board, and that's where Innovation Gym has come from. So as we get into this and we delve a little bit deeper, we just wanted to kind of leave you with three main things to take away from today. We want to talk about how traditional training has limitations and can create some barriers to learning effectively, but how the neuroscience of education and learning and some of the recent developments there can help inform how to design more actionable innovation training. And then finally, just give you a flavor of what an Innovation Gym session looks like and what you could expect from it. So that's probably enough background for me. Really wanted to spend some time discussing with Laura. So just to introduce Laura Flessner, who's you can see on the call. Laura is CEO of MindTap. She is an innovation coach and consultant, working with a wide range of organizations. You can see some of them here. And she's really helps organizations to unlock and upskill and unlock innovation and upskill and develop their learning. So she's a specialist in fusing neuroscience and agile innovation principles. And we coupled and teamed together with Laura to get her expertise in helping us to create Innovation Gym. So Laura, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Suzanne. Super excited to be here. I love talking neuroscience, of course, and learning is just a huge passion of mine. So I'm really excited to be able to share and discuss today.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, maybe if we can start with that, the challenges, starting for the why again. What have you come across in terms of seeing teams and innovation teams in particular facing the challenge in terms of their training and the kind of training that's out there now?
Yeah, well, I just first actually I go back to my own experience. I was in corporate world for over 15 years, and I remember going into training. I'm sure you remember too, maybe a full day training, right? You set aside that time, like you mentioned, and you are ready to go. You actually cleared your calendar. You're in at the beginning. You're super excited because you're here, and the trainer starts to talk. You get really learning new things. You're writing down notes and you're thinking, oh, this is fantastic. This is something I can really apply. Um, Maybe someone can go on mute. I was getting an
Yeah.
echo.
Could we just
Okay, great.
check? Sorry, could everybody be on? Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks. Um, and then, you get through the halfway of the morning, you get to a break and you're like, okay, this is really great. You're pumped up, your energy's high. You come back from the break and it starts to be a little bit harder to take information in.
Mhm.
And then you're like, okay, I can't wait till lunch to get another break. You're like, okay, maybe I'll refuel here and I get going. After you come back from lunch, you're still excited, but the intake is a little bit slower of the information you're getting. It feels like your brain is starting to get full. And by, towards the end of that afternoon, your brain just feels like it's on overload. You're like, I can't take any more information in. I don't know if any of you have all experienced that feeling. Um, Even, in today's world, it's like the last year, right? Where things have
Yeah,
changed a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah, yeah.
If you've had time to do any training in the craziness of the world and everything else that you've had to handle, it's been online. And online it has been actually really freeing, right? It's really convenient. Um, but even though it's really convenient, the format honestly hasn't changed much,
Yeah.
right? It's actually less interactive because it's not face to face. A lot of times it's on video on your own time. So you're not actually with the trainer.
Yeah.
And so, there's that element of engagement that starts to go down. There's a lot of distractions when
Mhm.
you're doing it remotely as well that you don't even realize you're doing. You're picking up your phone a little bit more. There's something else going on in the other room that you're hearing and kind of half listening to as well. So there's, a lot of challenges when it comes to training, especially in the corporate world, when there's so many other things you could be doing or feel like maybe you should be doing.
Yeah.
And then just the ways that our brain works can really only take in so much information and be able to process it at that the right time. So those are just a couple of things
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I
that
think
come to mind.
we can all sympathize with that and remember those training courses where it seemed like you were taking more calories on board than information, to be honest, um, as you try to fuel yourself to get to the end of the day. So, what if you think about traditional training? You mentioned that there, even though maybe the format has gone online, in most cases, not much has changed. What are the inherent sort of things that you see that make that challenging? I think you've alluded to a few of them there, but what's as a learner, what makes that a particular challenge?
Well, you even mentioned in your story how people know that they're going to forget a certain amount of information, and there's something called the forgetting curve.
Really?
So, within the first hour after you leave a training, you actually forget about 50%
Wow.
within the first hour
Wow.
on average. And then within 24 hours, it's 70%. And within a week, it's 90%.
Gosh.
Scary, right?
Absolutely. When you think of the return on investment, even of your time and also of the cost of training, that's
Of
pretty frightening.
exact on so many levels.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And well, the reason for that is really because of the way our brain works. It does take in only so much information at a time. And it does that because just in the world we live in, there are so many pieces of information that come in through our senses, right? Through the things we see and hear and smell and feel, even the temperature or the humidity of the air, right? All of these things our body is taking in as information, but our brain has to screen all of this information coming in and say, I can only process the important stuff. And so it does this cleansing process to be able to make room for all the new information that keeps coming in.
Right.
So because of that, you really can only learn, a few new things at a time
Mm-hmm.
because of the way our brain is trying to process and be able to take in new information.
Right. Okay.
And so that's where that heavy dose of everything at once.
Mm-hmm.
And also when you try to throw in theory in addition with application, right, that adds in the amount of information you're taking in.
Got it.
And so while theory might be really interesting, it might not be quite as useful if you need to apply it right away.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously there are, the traditional way of learning, especially in innovation for people who are time pressed, as you say, and want to use things right away. The challenges. I mean, you talked at the beginning and you talked a lot about the brain and how it works. Can you tell us a bit more about the neuroscience of what's happening? What's the latest thinking in this, and how can you start to understand? Okay, if that's not the ideal way for the brain to learn, what is the ideal way for the brain to learn? What have we learned in neuroscience to help us with this?
Yeah, it's really cool. I love these brain scans that I had sent you
Mm-hmm.
because it really illustrates the limitations of traditional learning, which often is you're sitting and listening, right? And so you can see the activation of the brain when you are listening to
Mm-hmm.
new information. And then a lot of times you'll have maybe some pre-reading or some reading you might have to do in an exercise. You see there's an area of the brain that's different from listening. So it adds on, which is great. But it's still a pretty small area of the brain. And then there are probably little quizzes that you might have along the way to recall the information, right? It activates a different part of your brain. You're starting to be able to bring back the information you take in and be able to push it out, which is important.
Right.
But still, even combining all three of those things, there's an even more powerful way of learning, and that is through teaching, right? Actually, there's a saying to say that you teach the things that you need to learn the most.
Right. Got it.
Because when you're teaching, you have to apply the knowledge and be able to explain it in multiple ways for the other person to understand what's going on.
Right.
It's the
So may I just pause you there? Sorry, this is too important to miss. I think, could I just ask if everybody is on mute if you're not talking, because I think we're getting an echo. So if I could all ask you to put, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. You could, everybody else could put that on mute. Sorry, Laura, this is really important. So we want to know about the brain when it's teaching, and how does that relate to learning?
Yeah. So in teaching it, you're actually learning in that sense, and it's that difference between. I still feel like I'm getting an echo.
Yes, I'm trying to look and see if I can put people on mute. Yeah, I think it's on mute now. Okay, perfect.
Great, thank you. It's that difference between knowing and doing.
Right.
To me, that's the biggest gap that is not filled by traditional corporate training. Because it's understanding the theory and understanding how things are supposed to work is completely different than using that information to make impact on your own work.
Right.
Right. And even Tony Robbins has mentioned knowledge is power, is what a lot of people say, but actually knowledge is only potential power, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
Action is power. Execution will trump knowledge any day of the week.
Absolutely. Okay.
So in this sense, when you're applying it, you're using a whole different part of your brain because you're trying to connect the dots between what you know and the current situation. You're trying to connect the understanding of examples you've seen to how do I apply that to this particular example or situation I'm in.
Right.
And that makes the brain work in a completely different way.
So in this sense, a student on a training course, are they can effectively, if we could get their brain to fire up in the same way as if they were teaching it, then that's really going to activate the most learning.
It reminds me of when I was actually in college. And there, the ways that I loved to learn the most or do our homework, which is really the application piece, was in a group.
Mm-hmm.
I had my homework friends that we would go to the library together, and we would tackle the problems together. And together, someone was having a hard time, another person would jump in and say, "Well, hey, I think you do it this way because of this." And in that instance, that student is teaching the other student.
Right.
Right. And then vice versa, something else might happen, and the other student starts to teach the other student. And in this way, you're teaching each other as you're learning it. You're applying that knowledge as you're learning it. You can even be teaching yourself as you do your homework yourself.
Right.
But it's even more powerful when you're able to do it together.
So how can we think about this principle when looking at how to design better training? Then what's the consequence then for
Yes. Okay. So, well, one of the elements on how we were thinking of applying it, right, was um, there is an element where you need to know the foundation of a new principle, right, of learning. So there's going to be an element of taking it in, whether you're reading it, listening to it. So you need to be able to do that. But the most powerful piece of being able to take in new information is the teaching part. So being able to dedicate that time for that interaction, for that hard work and messy work, honestly, of that application of the teaching piece of the information is the most important when you're doing or thinking about learning, particularly in innovation where things are not always and usually straightforward.
no, there's no set of rules.
There really aren't.
So getting activating these areas of the brain, getting them to actively almost behave in a teaching like way, either teaching themselves or the interaction, that's something that's key.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic. So the other thing that we talked about is new education principles, and there's been quite a change, and I kind of, if for those who may be not aware, is that the whole theory of education is fast moving at the moment, and a lot of debate and a lot of interest in new models of education. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, certainly. And there's actually neuroscience behind this as well.
Wow.
So, traditionally, it's that one-way street of knowledge going from the teacher, the expert, to the students and participants. And essentially, you're filling up their bowl of knowledge. In this new version, there's an element of, right, the expert being more of an orchestrator. And the fact that information is coming from multiple different places. And the fact that, especially in our information-rich world today, there is information everywhere. And so being able to pull from all these different places and for that teacher to be able to point to, well, hey, take a look here, here, do this project and with this particular case study here, why don't you look at this example from that was posted over here online that I didn't even create because it's a real world example, is really important to be able to tie all these things together. But what's really interesting about this is it provides variety
Mm-hmm.
for that learning, right? Because we all know that variety is really important to keep us engaged, which is why a lot of gamification and all these other things come into play. But the other thing that this does is it presents the same information in multiple formats, in multiple ways. And you're getting the repetition that's required to be able to create those neural pathways to solidify the information and the application, as we were talking about, most important, the application within your brain, so that when you can access it much easier when those neural pathways are stronger. The only way to make those stronger is through repetition.
Wow. But not necessarily repetition of the same stimulus, but of lots of multiple stimulus that works better.
It even works better because then you're
Wow.
able to apply it in different ways. You can see it happening in different situations, and then you can be able to have more flexibility with how you apply that knowledge.
Fantastic. Fascinating.
Yeah.
So when it came to obviously taking some of this and also the sort of agile innovation principles that you're, are you're also an expert in, what were the things that, distilling this down, saying, okay, that's great, but how do you apply that? How do you create, um, instill this into a new kind of training course? Really helped us put together Innovation Gym as a concept.
Yeah. Well, what was really exciting for me is that even as we approached creating this, Suanne, is we approached it in an innovative way in our process. So that was most exciting to me as well. We were applying what we knew to creating this in ourselves, right? But we talked already about being super simple, right? So starting with the core concepts, making sure those are really clear, and then expanding those in multiple applications and different ways and formats
Right.
to be able to take that in. So combining that first one with that fourth one of being able to keep that simple idea, but having it repeated in different ways.
Oh, got it.
And then we built in stories, right? We built in real case studies because that's also how we connect as people just to information is through an element of story and being able to see it applied within a full context, right? What is going on at the time? How does this fit in? And what are the pieces of the puzzle that need to come together?
Right.
So we built that in with a lot of good case studies. And that repetition piece with those multiple formats is how we solidify it and create those neural pathways in the session. And you can actually feel the hard work, almost the strain of those neural pathways forming as you go through.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, just conscious of time here, and I want to make sure we open up to some questions if there are any. Just to kind of close out, I'll flip through that one. Given all of those principles, I mean, obviously we work with Laura to develop Innovation Gym, but just to kind of take it down to a practical level, what does all this mean in terms of an Innovation Gym session? Well, when you do a gym session, firstly, it's going to be really focused. It's going to be on one particular law. You heard Laura mention about don't try to overload the brain with too much. You're going to forget a lot of it. So keep this core topic really simple. So they're very focused, very high intensity. As Laura said, they're really can be quite hard thinking work. But with these multiple stimulus, we use typically a pre-work or via video stimulus, and those will be kind of core principles to priming those muscles. And then the gym session itself is about two hours of pretty intense work. So as Laura mentioned, we have case studies which help that kind of storifying it and helping people to understand it through a story. But then a lot of these active reps. So you're getting the repetition, but you're actually doing. So using that kind of teaching, firing up the brain activity to really actively learn. And then afterwards, there's some support to make sure to try and offset that forgetting curve a little bit by support materials, and as I mentioned, practicing and reinforcing the learning, doing the homework afterwards, which can really help. So a gym session looks a little bit different from a traditional classroom style training, and most certainly feels different, I think, when you're in it. So just to kind of cover off, we have a menu of different topics that we cover on Innovation Gym. You can see everything from human insight, ideal experience, product insights and product models, story-led ideas, demos and claims, concept development, and MVP building and design and ideation. So this is something that, and if anyone has more interest, can follow up with me on. But I just wondered if at this point we wanted to open up to a couple of, probably have time for one or two questions, if there are any, for Laura or for me. And or you can put them on the Zoom chat and we can see if there are any questions there. So if you want to ask a question, please do come off mute. And if you can't get off mute, let me know and I'll unmute you. Any questions?
Can I ask Laura, how long would be an optimum learning opportunity? What is there a hard and fast time?
There is, really around, I would say hard work of about 90 minutes to 2 hours. 2 hours is probably the max that you want to go at any point in time before your brain kind of has that overload feeling. And you probably felt that right through maybe a morning course and you can't wait for that first break. That's typically when it happens, right halfway through to about 2 hours. And that's used in workshops and any active working sessions as well. It's when the brain is doing that hard work. 90 minutes to 2 hours is that sweet spot.
Great, thanks. Any other questions, either on the chat or do you want to open up to ask more questions? And if there are no more questions, I'll just flash this up. If anybody's interested, you can scan this code to get the menu that I just shared. Or if you would like to discuss arranging a gym session, please do email me. You can see the email at the bottom of the page there. And more information is available on LinkedIn, through which some of you signed up. So thanks so much, Laura, for taking time out today to discuss this with us. And thanks to everybody who attended.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Suanne. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.